Hello, namaskar, and welcome to Talking Point Blank. Now, आज Talking Point Blank पे I will talk about Pakistan-Afghanistan. क्या चल रहा है and what is going on now. हमने देखा कि last week there was a deal, peace deal के लिए गए थे पाकिस्तान के senior minister ख्वाजा आसिफ, उनके साथ DGISI भी थे, आसिम मलिक और बाकी ऑफिशियल्स भी थे। तालिबान की तरफ से हमने जो उनके जीडी चीफ हैं वो थे, और जो उनके सीनियर ऑफिशियल्स हैं वो थे। और दोहा में जो है उन्होंने पीस डील की बात की। पीस क्यों कर रहे हैं, वी नो कि हमने स्क्रमिशेस देखे बिटवीन अफगानिस्तान एंड तालिबान ऑन the entire Durand line last week. Pakistan suffered heavy casualties, not only in in men, but also with material and also with a bit of land, because spin boldak में तालिबान ने जो है वो कब्जा किया था पाकिस्तानी पोस्ट पे। कुरम में एक जगह कब्जा किया था पाकिस्तानी पोस्ट पे, टीटा में एक जगह कब्जा किया था पाकिस्तानी पोस्ट पे। उसके बाद उनकी पीस डील हुई और उन्होंने सीज फायर जो है वो डिक्लेयर किया। सीज फायर डिक्लेयर करने के बाद एक ऑफिशियल स्टेटमेंट आया कतर का, saying that both the countries have agreed to resolve their border disputes through dialogue, and there is a ceasefire and there will be a second round of dialogue. But before it could go to the second round of dialogue, there was a very dramatic change. और dramatic change था not in breaking of ceasefire, but in breaking of that content of that letter, which was drafted by the Qatar official ministry, जहाँ पर उन्होंने दोबारा से statement issue किया, and they removed the word border dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, what that actually means is that the Taliban made a strong objection to calling Durand Line, which they do not recognize at all as a border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And they made sure that that word has been basically removed and it has been rephrased, saying that, mutual discords between the two countries would be settled through dialogue and peace. So what that entails is basically what I want to tell you is that, and the Pakistanis had no objection, by the way, So we had not seen any Pakistani objection to it, neither from their official sources, not from their any unofficial sources like Mohsen Naqvi and all that, who usually keep on covering and coming and giving a यूजुअली पाकिस्तान की आदत होती है ऑफिशियली कुछ बोलते हैं, फिर उनके इंटीरियर मिनिस्टर कुछ बोलते हैं, फिर डिफेंस मिनिस्टर कुछ बोलते हैं, फिर फॉरेन मिनिस्टर कुछ बोलते हैं। तो इस बारी देयर वाज नॉट इवन अ वर्ड ऑफ कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान व्हेन कतर वेंट एंड चेंज्ड दैट लैंग्वेज। द साउदीज कैरीड द सेम लैंग्वेज, बट कतरीज चेंज्ड इट विद इन 24 hours. व्हाट डज दैट मीन? दैट बेसिकली मीन्स कि ये स्टोरी थोड़ी सी लंबी है, सो बेयर विद मी, इट्स गोना बी अ बिट ऑफ a long podcast, not a podcast but a video. Basically, Pakistan had always envisioned Afghanistan to be its strategic depth. हमेशा से पाकिस्तान ने ये बात की है कि अफगानिस्तान जो होगा वो पाकिस्तान का strategic depth होगा. But what has happened in last so many years, the last 50 years, is that this strategic depth has turned into Pakistan's strategic depth. And that's what I want to explain how. Now, border dispute की जहाँ तक बात है, Durand Line की जहाँ तक बात है, there has always been, a dispute from Afghanistan. Every Afghan government has disputed it, whether right from 1950s to 1960s, and through 1960s, 70s tak. Things were so bad between Afghanistan and Pakistan that they diplomatically had to sever ties twice. It happened in 1960 also, it happened in 1950 also. So twice they had to diplomatically sever their ties because they could not come to an agreement on what is the status of Durand Line. Now, Durand Line is something which the Britishers, basically drew an imaginary line between when Pakistan was created between Afghanistan and Pakistan, in which a lot of Pashtun areas, जिसको हम northwest frontier province बोलते हैं, NWFP जो है, that went to Pakistan, and that is something which really agonized the Afghans, because Afghans always say that Pashtuns are a big part of Afghanistan culturally, religiously, traditionally as well. So they saw it as a divide, and these were the इलाकाए गैर जिनको बोलते थे कि जहाँ पर ना ही British forces जाती थी, ना ही Pakistani forces कभी गई. They were largely left ungoverned with their own tribal codes and with their own system of governance. NWFP was later on changed to जिसको आज हम बोलते हैं खैबर पख्तूनवा. So खैबर पख्तूनवा बेल्ट जो आपका है, जो प्रोविंस है, उसको प्रोविंस में चेंज करके फिर ये खैबर पख्तूनवा हो गया. पार्ट्स ऑफ बलोचिस्तान इसमें आता है, क्वेटा तक आता है, which Taliban has always claimed कि this is a part and parcel of Afghanistan. Not only Taliban, but every Afghan government has claimed that. So what happened was, all through 1950s and 1960s, what happened is that the Afghans were really at loggerheads with Pakistanis. Come 1970s, Pakistan loses a war, does a major surrender in front of India. They lose Bangladesh, West Pakistan to Bangladesh. And then a thought starts seeping into Pakistani military saying that they need to fall back upon. Now, this thought was actually, to fall back upon a more you can say more land, more area, because they believe that, sustained a long Indian invasion in Pakistan, the Pakistani military will not be able to save Pakistan and will not be able to sustain that kind of a long attack or a long invasion by India. Now, why was that this triggered also? There is a reason behind it. If you remember that in 1970, when Henry Kissinger really called up the Chinese and told them that they had to move and do something when India was invading, East Bangladesh, was liberating East Bangladesh. I would say not invading, I'm sorry for that word. But after that, the Pakistanis really had a hope that Chinese are going to come in and Chinese are going to, save them, because Pakistan has always envisioned a two-front war with India, wherein Pakistan and China would together get into war with India and defeat India. The Pakistanis were very desperate, and Pakistanis did appeal the Chinese also to help them. Now, the Chinese refused any American, pressure to even maneuver at that point of time in the Indian Ocean or be aggressive on the LAC to contain India in East Pakistan. But the Pakistanis went ahead and appealed to the Chinese for help. Similarly to how the US was trying to do. What happened after that was the Chinese really told them that, we sympathize with you. We know you're a warrior, calm, and even if you have to go and fight in the mountains, please go and fight in the mountains, but don't give up. So Chinese basically told them to get lost. If they lose Pakistan, they can go into the mountains, deep into the mountains of Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and all those areas, and they can keep fighting there. The Chinese were not coming. So that gave a precedence of thought to the Pakistani military then. After 71, we know that Bhutto was hanged. General Zia was in power. 75, they had hanged him. General Zia had taken over. But then General Zia was there before Bhutto was hanged. He became a general in, I think, 73 or 74. I really don't remember the exact year. But in his mind, it was always very clear that, they need Afghanistan to be their strategic depth instead of their strategic, problems they had with Afghanistan, because they always saw Afghanistan as a huge trouble, just like they saw Iran by that time. 1979 is when Pakistanis actually got the opportunity to envision their plan. So his doctrine tha General Zia ka, where he wanted to change Afghanistan into a strategic depth, and how he wanted to do that was basically get in a pro-Pakistan government in Kabul, because till that time every government in Afghanistan was largely anti-Pakistan when it came to border issues. So they wanted a pro-Pakistan government in Kabul, which would actually go ahead and recognize the Durand Line. What happened instead was, we know that the Russians invaded Afghanistan, and all that Afghan war, Afghan jihad started. So Hikmat-e-Yar, Ahmad Shah Massoud, all these warlords were basically then, you can say, patronaged by Pakistan to fight the Soviets. And we know how that decade went, because both the Americans and the Saudis started putting lots of money into Afghan jihad. Which, till Soviet withdrawal for that decade was on. Now, during that time, it was the ISI which was majorly in control of the policy. Now, ISI ki problem ye thi ki because General Zia was alive, there was no political opposition, there was no social opposition. Jo military chahti thi, wo hota tha. Jo military decide karti thi, wo hota tha. Jo ISI plan banati thi, wo hota tha. ठीक है? So ISI का basically ये हो गया था कि it became too big for its own shoes, to a point जहाँ पर there was no political rivalry, there was no challenge, there was nothing. They were a single entity handling Afghan policy. Until Zia was there, that policy of Islamism, extreme Islamism, was working for them to some extent. But things turned after 1988, after Zia died. So what happened since the civilian government came into power? Benazir Bhutto was in power. Things started changing for the ISI, because then they started having local opposition in terms of politics, in terms of other stakeholders, in terms of leaders, in terms of ISI's own internal lobbies, which had their own interests. Some had Islamized, Islamic, most of them had Islamic utopian interests. Some of them had personal interests. Some of them were extremely sectarian. So it started dividing the ISI from within. On Afghan policy, it was very fragmented. Another big mistake which ISI made was that the majority of officers who were basically operating in Afghanistan for the ISI, they were all ethnically Pashtuns. Now, what happened with those was, last 10 years, these Pashtuns, first they worked with Hikmatyar, right? And then ISI created Taliban. So those Pashtuns, what they did was they became ideologically very ingrained with the thought of Islamization, and especially with the thought of Taliban. As one ISI officer had very candidly said, that they became more Taliban than the Taliban itself. So what happened was, the feedback which was coming from the ground was ignored largely because they were more religiously, driven, and they would pursue the wrong policy more than the right policy, or made any corrective changes which were needed by the Pakistani establishment to make at that point of time. That is why we see Pakistani army still so rigid, and they have no idea how to deal with civilian protests at all. They're clueless when it comes to their own regional security. So all through the 90s, once this fragmentation of this ISI became a bit of a directionless rudder, and the fight between the warlords started happening after the withdrawal of Soviets between 1989 and 1992. We saw Hikmatyar was very, they all were power hungry. Afghanistan was literally fragmented. If I start on the history of what happened, then I have to do, this video will go on for 2 hours. So I'll just put it in a gist. Afghanistan literally was fragmented, province by province, governed by warlords which had their own rules, which had their own regulations. Most of them were involved into loots, drugs, rapes, and whatnot. I mean, all illegal activity, and obviously infighting. And what we saw in Kabul was also when Ahmad Shah Massoud rebelled against the Kabul government, and they went ahead. Najib was there. So Pakistanis came up with the idea of Taliban. Now, the Pakistani idea of Taliban was very simple. Pashtun people, and this was driven by the Pashtun leader, the Pashtun officer cadre in the ISI and Pakistani military, who saw this as a possible solution towards, Afghanistan, because they were more worried about Islamization in Afghanistan than they really thought about Pakistan. So they came up with an idea saying that let's create Taliban, which would be highly Pashtun. Majority of them were Pashtuns. Majority of them were, had studied in madrasas in Pakistan. About 15,000 Taliban soldiers were raised in madrasas in Pakistan initially. Most of them were only dependent on Pakistan for the funds which had come from the Saudis and the Americans, and Pakistan still had a lot of money that time to support this kind of thing. So they created Taliban. Now, once you created a Pashtun army, and the way Taliban initially, and Pakistan honestly wasn't very sure initially of how Taliban is going to, take over Kabul. They thought that maybe the tribal area, the Taliban would be able to exert some influence there and, hold on to that area so that their own national security, internal security then can be balanced by dictating Taliban how to run the Pashtun belt, the NFWP, or the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and parts of Balochistan. What in turn happened is that Taliban went ahead and captured whole of Kabul, because people in Kabul really thought them as saviors because they were tired of these warlords. Now, Taliban fought very bitterly with Ahmad Shah Massoud, because Massoud was more of a nationalist than he was a religious zealot. So long story short, Masood got assassinated. Taliban was able to come in power. They started doing what we saw in Taliban 1, Sharia and all that. So Pakistanis really thought that it's going to help them. Now, what happened there was, the problem was Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden by that time was deeply entrenched into the war in Afghanistan. And bin Laden was a very, very dear asset of the Saudis and the Pakistanis. And all through the 90s, Pakistanis are the ones who actually introduced bin Laden to Mullah Umar, the Taliban leader who founded Taliban. And both of them got along together very, very well. So when 9/11 happened, the Saudis were not happy, nor were the Americans. The Saudis were very clear that bin Laden cannot be handed over to Americans. But Saudis were also very, very clear that, he can be either, punished by the Taliban and or handed over to the Pakistanis. And Pakistanis would have handed over him to the Americans, which in the end happened. Bin Laden was killed in Pakistan, was kept in Abbottabad. But things went bad because when there was too much pressure from US on Saudi to hand over bin Laden, Saudi did agree. So Saudi sent their senior minister Al-Turki to Afghanistan, to Kabul. He met there with Mullah Umar. And what Mullah Umar did next was something which really, really shocked the Saudis. He actually went ahead and he abused the royal family of the Saudis. And he refused to give bin Laden away to the Americans. And that is where the American invasion started. After that, the 9/11 thing, right? Bin Laden, after the Americans invaded, moved to Tora Bora. From Tora Bora, through Kurram, moved into Pakistan and started living in Abbottabad. But it's not about bin Laden, it's about Taliban. Taliban fought the way they fought. They ran away from Kabul. Were aptly supported by Pakistan in the same NFWP area. These were their training bases, their hiding bases, their homes. Once Taliban came back in 2021, you remember Lieutenant General Fayaz Hamid, who had that very famous cup of tea saying all is well. Imran Khan was in power, and Imran was somebody who was willing to let Afghan Taliban have their sway over Pakistan national security. What I mean by that is Imran was somebody who had said that 40,000 TTP families would be settled into Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and he was looking at a solution, keeping it as a temporary line, moving it away. But that is something what the Pakistan military never wanted to do. After the removal of Imran Khan, we saw how TTP has pounded Pakistan day in and day out with numerous attacks. Now, what Taliban also did was Taliban changed, when Pakistan was thinking about making Taliban its strategic asset, Taliban used the same thing very quietly and changed it around Pakistan. So what they did was they actually started patronizing a lot of extremist Sunni small militia factions within Pakistan, something like Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Sipahi-e-Sahaba, and all these organizations which basically went ahead. And then, they created ruckus in Pakistan when they started the sectarian violence, attacking minorities, Shias, Christians, Hindus, but especially the Shias. So Afghanistan basically turned Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa belt as its rear base to launch attacks inside Pakistan and to destabilize Pakistan. These organizations literally challenged the writ of the state, and since that day, Pakistan has not been able to recover, because after these organizations, they still operate. See the way that TTP and BLA have been, pounding Pakistani internal security the way they have been. So what happened was, in turn, was the Pakistanis have completely lost this border notion, what they call as, or between Afghanistan and between, Pakistan. The Durand line has become very, very invisible. Afghan Taliban and the Pashtuns are able to move in and out of these lines, moving weapons, moving drugs, people to people contact, and in fact ideology as well. So the Talibanization, the Islamic Talibanization of the Pashtuns in KPK is real and has happened. People in KPK in today's date and age recognize with the larger Islamic Talibanization mindset of the Afghans and want to be with the Afghans. And that is where Afghanis, instead of creating, getting used by Pakistanis, used the same assets and turned against Pakistan. If you know the concept of Ghazwa-e-Hind, in Ghazwa Hind, the first country they want to take over is Pakistan, because they do not recognize Pakistan as a country. And this is a serious flaw the Pakistani generals and their policymakers made, because mostly of them are, driven by religious zealotism, I would say, or, fanatism, or they have these wishful ideas and wishful thinkings. You've seen them doing in Kashmir. They came with visual ideas. They came with this magical, they think in these magical terms, what we call is magnetic ideas, which have always failed Pakistan. The reason behind that is because Pakistani military is highly rigid, is highly corrupt, and really serves their own interest and the interest of their nation. So that is what brought Pakistan's strategic depth, which Zia had actually envisioned, into Pakistan's own strategic depth. Now, why do a strategic depth? Let me repeat that word. And why is it a strategic depth? Because, if you look at now Pakistan, you have Afghanistan on one side in the West, which is extremely hostile to you. You have a completely cut off Iran, which is also, not your friend. Then you have a China, which is very disenchanted at the moment, because obviously the Americans are back and the Chinese are not liking them in Balochistan. Then you have a very assertive India, which is ready to pound Pakistan at a drop of a hat. All these things have made Pakistan extremely isolated. All these things have also brought upon Pakistan the reality of two-front war, which Pakistan envisioned with India, with China. Now it's a reality for Pakistan, because both Operation Sindhu 2.0 is on, and on the other side, the Afghans are pounding. So their borders are hot, and they don't have the men and the machinery to man their borders. But this is where Pakistan strategically has been defeated. This is where Pakistan's strategic death has happened. So, irrespective of how things are going to go now, Pakistan is pushing back. Pakistan is creating ISIS to limit, Afghan Taliban in Taliban. It's not going to be an easy game, because, the Iranians are very wary of it. The Chinese are very wary of it. Taliban is onto it. And the more Pakistan tries to create, rifts inside Afghanistan, the more severe backlash is going to come in Pakistan. And that is going to be Pakistan's nemesis. So I hope you like this video. If there is any other detail you would like me to address to, or there is something else you would like to know, please ask me. I'll be very happy to make a short part 2 of this video to run you through a sequence of events that has happened. I've just put this video in a gist, and if you like this video, please share it with your friends and your family. I hope you ask them to subscribe to this channel as well, help me grow this channel. And you can also contribute to my channel and to my team by becoming members, or through super thanks or super chats. I hope to see you next time, and I hope that you really like this video. Till then, Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.